my name is Erika Fischer-Lichte. I'm professor at the Freie Universität Berlin and director of the International Research Center Interweaving Performance Cultures.
My name is Naomi Boyce, and I'm a student assistant at Interweaving Performance Cultures, and I've been working here since 2018.
My name is Umit Soltani. I'm a research associate at the International Research Center, and I'm part of the team working on the Handbook project.
My name is Thorsten Joost. I work here at the Research Center as a researcher for now, I think more than 10 years. And I've been very much involved in this Handbook project as one of the co-editors.
The idea was not at the beginning of our colleague. It came up in the discussions with the fellows. Every now and then someone said, well, I can't use here the English term because it is not a good translation to my Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Maori, whatever you name it, term. I must introduce that one.
And so the idea of this handbook is really to foster something like an interlingual writing style, right? That thrives through translation and explanation, and to not assume and somehow critique the assumption that there is a universality to the English language.
And on the long run, it turned out that within one language, the different concepts related to theater and performance form something which we could call an epistemic system. And so we thought it might be a great idea to compile a handbook.
And it's called the Handbook on Performance-Related Concepts in Non-European Languages.
The way we proceeded was that we arranged a workshop for each language that took one or two, mostly 2 days.
And our aim during these workshops will be to determine the 10 most important concepts that would be of interest and should be included in the handbook as key concepts related to performance in this language.
Of course, no. First, we cannot cover all languages that might be there. Second, we cannot refer to all the concepts that are there in the languages.
So I think it is important to know that these workshops were organized in a spirit that has something to do with our center and the idea of interweaving from the start.
So we did it in a, let's put it, a very practical way. We relied on the fellows we had in our colleague and on their knowledge and what they could provide.
So in these workshops, we try to have a wide range of people that are involved, always.
We invited theater scholars, theater practitioners, linguists, and partly also philosophers of language.
We thought it would be really interesting to mix the participants in terms of people who are working in theater and performance studies in the respective context and country. On the other hand, we thought it would be really interesting to have people who work outside of performance studies or even academia, artists really, who can contribute from their perspective of practicing artists and tell us, so in rehearsal processes, which are the terms that you encounter the most? And so that they could say, well, this is a term that might be really interesting in academic context, but we are never using it during rehearsal processes, or I never encountered this concept in reviews, for example. And because we were aiming for about 10 participants in these workshops,
who in advance were asked to make a list of what, from their point of view, would be the 10 most important concepts if they talk about theater and performance.
We sometimes ended up with a list of 70, 80 key concepts that all the participants thought should be included.
And with that material then, we began each workshop. And there we discussed then.
And that was always very exciting, always very funny too, and sometimes highly controversial between those participants. But we, in the end of 3 days, we always ended up with a list of 10 terms.
And this is the way we came to the 10 concepts that are always included.
We'll have a longer introduction, general introduction, authored by Erika Fischer-Lichte. And in this longer introduction, she will address the aims of this book, the general aims and purpose this handbook has. And then there will be several handbook sections.
Chinese, Japanese, and Korean. Then there is Arabic, and there is
Yoruba and Indian languages. And there will be a conclusion, an outlook, actually, more than a conclusion, it will be an outlook that addresses Maori concepts. And each of these sections has a similar order. There will be an introduction, a long introductory essay to each language section. And the purpose of this introductory essay is to explain the selection that will follow, why these 10 terms and not different ones, and also the aims of these general introductions is to sketch a history of terms, of an epistemic systems, you know, these terms build, and to explain how this landscape of interlinked concepts formed and why. And this is very different in each of these sections.
My name is Khalid Amin. I am a professor of performance studies at Al-Malksadi University, and also the president of the International Center for Performance Studies in Tangier. So yeah, my work in the handbook, performance-related concepts, I mean, the section of Arabic consists of contributing, first of all, a general introduction, and then I think 4 entries. One, it's related to Forja, the other one about Halqa, the other one about Hakawati, I think, and the third one maybe about Jesed with other partners. The intention behind it, just to follow up with what Professor Erika Fischer-Lichte was saying. I think here, this project was extremely important because it's premised first, on like 3 major, I would say, things. The first one, it's the possibility of achieving, let's say, a democratic interweaving across worldwide performance cultures, and given the fact that each one has very specific, concepts, and even while receiving other concepts from, let's say, the European theater or European tradition, etc., the mobility of these concepts, had been affected actually by, the local usage. So we can speak here about untranslatability as a factor that informs but also deforms, the consistency of how the concept is used in this culture and in that culture. Yeah, that's number one. Premise number 2 is, really a kind of collaborative rethinking of the intercultural paradigm and its configuration of the other on the outside. And of course, here we are speaking about a rethinking that is founded on reciprocity as well as vision as a vision, and also, a negotiation of power knowledge. So, and the third promise is maybe a kind of invitation to practice a double critique as a way of saying and doing. The major concern of this project, as I see it myself, is really a kind of, let's say, going forward, at least to explore certain, epistemic differences between, let's say, East and West, and North and South, but not geographically, but also as, the global South as an epistemology as well. Let me go back to the workshop. During the workshop on performance-related concepts, mainly the Arabic version, prominent scholars from different parts of the Arab world, they were invited, to the workshop. And of course, they were invited also to put on the table, at least 5 concepts. So we had Lina Majdalani, we had Nora Amin, we had Rabi Amroui, Edward Zeiter, Marvin Carlson, Shamsuddin from Sudan. Anyway, it's a diversity from, the Middle East, North Africa, but as well as from Sudan and other parts. And each one of us is supposed to write an entry on that concept. And definitely, when you choose a concept, that means you are the one who should be writing about it. And of course, in the introduction, I had to speak about the difficulty of speaking, like Arabic concepts in relation to, other concepts that are worldwide used, definitely. So starting with performance, for example, as an Anglo-American concept, and you know that the mobility of this concept is very much, posing serious problems, not only while being translated into Arabic, but also into French, into German, I'm sure, into other languages. So what does it mean, performance? Is it to perform? Is it, a twice behaved behavior? Is it a spectacle, etc.? So in Arabic, it's even worse because, we have a linguistic diglossia and diversity from the Middle East, North Africa, and the Maghreb. So I'm based in Morocco, and definitely our use of the concept, of forja, for example, is completely different from how it is resonated, or resonating in the Middle East. And here we have really to dig into the archaeology of how it has been deployed, and of course go back to the dictionary, etc. It's exactly like the rasa, or rasa in the Indian language, and its relation to catharsis. It's not 100%, catharsis as an emotional discharge, but it's more than that. And of course, it cannot be simply translated as catharsis. It's the same with performance. It cannot simply render it in one specific word and say ada or forja. But we really need to think twice, particularly when it comes to deriving other terminology out of it. When we read Fischer-Lichter's transformative power of performance, we have, performativity and performatives. And so these derivatives are quite difficult to underpin when it comes to, deciding whether I will use ada or forja. So when going back to the dictionary, of course, we have انكشاف الغم ومشاهدة ما يتسلى به. And this is a very clear indication that the Arabs, at least in the past, they used to have something like catharsis and related to forja, etc. But unfortunately, we can speak about, the lack, let's say, of an Arabic translation, actually, of tragedy and comedy in the Arabic language up till the mid-19th century. So we have serious problems related to how, for example, Averroes mistranslated tragedy and comedy as al-madh wal-hija, which are completely separate genre, etc. But of course, there are people who are speaking about mistranslation, but I would prefer to talk about the impossibility of translation. in this process, but at least they should explain it. That's exactly the case of Forja. Speaking about Forja, I really need to explain it rather than to put it as simply performance, because performance is a very complex and very broad term. It's a performance of an engine of a car, but also it's a performance of something artistic, etc. But of course, when you derive from it performative and performativity, as I said, then we have serious problems. So al-ada equals, doing in Arabic, but Forja, it's really about seeing, watching a performance. And of course, when going back to the roots of Arabic and say how in mid-19th century, for example, they choose to speak about marzah and then masrah and then masrah at the end. So masrah, it's really the space, the theater. It's the space where the action is taking place, but also when you connect it with the theatron for the Greeks, it's really where it's the place where the audience are watching. So Forja is much more related to that. Forja is much more related to, something to be seen by an audience. Whereas Ada, it's something to be enacted on stage or in a performance space. So there are quite radical changes, in meaning. But of course, they are used, unfortunately, interchangeably in the Arab world. And in the Middle East, they prefer Ada for performance. And in the Maghreb, particularly in Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia, they prefer Forja. Forja, it's I would say it's one of the contested terms and concepts in the workshop of Arabic, but also in the Arab world. Why? Because of this understanding in the Middle East, it's very much connected to popular performances, traditional performances, folklores, and stuff like that. Whereas in the Maghreb, we are thinking of it much more as an umbrella term that can be developed within a broad spectrum of performance and performance studies.
The jobs of us here at the center was really more as moderators.
We would be between the author, our editor here, and the language editor there.
We're also reading through the texts in a way as first readers of the text and giving feedback.
We were always giving feedback and saying, we have no idea, maybe this context should be explained a bit more. Maybe you can give a short explanation of the term you're using to describe the other term, and feedback like this. And then our job transformed into editing work.
Well, we receive manuscripts from the authors who have worked on different terms in different languages, and we format them, set them to the correct style based on our style sheet that we have developed here at the center specifically for the Handbook project. It would go through various proofreaders and editors who are in constant contact with the authors themselves.
And together with the other students working on the book, we are working on all the bibliographical information. We're working on formatting the text according to the Chicago style.
The publisher had asked us to use the Chicago Manual of Style, but as a roadmap, Chicago Manual is very helpful. But concerning the project that we needed to work on, we found that there are some limitations for non-English languages and the material that was coming from those sources. But it was easy enough to adapt our needs to the structure that Chicago Manual would provide and tweak those limitations in a way that it would create opportunities for us to be more clear in our expressions.
I mean, there are questions in terms of like in Chicago and in many relevant publications, for example, only in the bibliography, you'll have the last name of the author and then the first initial of their name. And we've decided that, especially for certain languages where authors share the same last name, it's helpful to have the incomplete first name as well, which is men going back and deciding, okay, we're going to have the full first name for every single author in the entire book.
The writing system is different, the typography is different, but they can both support each other to produce a synthesized text that can be accessible not only to the English speakers, but also people from those original cultures whose terminology is being defined for an English-speaking audience or reader.
And of course, these are small details, but there are details that are important in terms of how we introduce these authors and introduce these discourses on these terms from different regions of the world.
On the surface of it, it looked like preparing a handbook consisting of different languages, all in English and according to an American English style sheet would be paradoxical. But as we went further, we realized that we didn't need to just focus on the limitations that this brings, but it would bring opportunities for blending these languages in a way that it would benefit both sides.
And then, of course, with each new section that we work on, we began with Yoruba, and then we moved on to China and Japan, and of course we go back and forth a bit, and we're ending with India, more or less. It means that new questions come up each time and new challenges in terms of how we format certain things, how we want to cite foreign language publications. And then that means that when we reach new challenges or figure out new questions in terms of the editing process, we have to go back and look at what we've done previously. So that means, yeah, as I said before, it means we're going through each text many, many times.
What was really helpful is that even with the Chicago Manual, the main requirement is to be consistent rather than be strict. So we had this chance to try different things and see what looks practically on the page when it is printed out. Is it readable enough? Does it keep both sides relevant and happy and on an equal standing or not?
If Yoruba would be the language that is read everywhere, or Chinese, let's put it like that, it would be published in Chinese. But the fact is, we all have to adapt to English.
You know, it's like when speaking about the post-colonial paradigm and post-colonial writings, most of them, you know, are written in English. And of course, there are these subalterns, they were given voice, you know, in the West. So we have to rethink again, you know, our, I would say, relation with this West, because the West is not one unified, you know, homogeneous, but it's heterogeneous. And we have to think also about, you know, writing in English and using English as a lingua franca doesn't mean that we are, you know, completely subordinated within, you know, the Eurocentric paradigm, etc.
One should emphasize that this handbook is not written only in English. Actually, it's written in many languages, or many languages have been woven into this English text.
The point is, it has nothing to do with whether something is German or English or whatsoever. Here, there are concepts from non-European languages which are not so well known all over the world, and they should spread. People should read what there is, and therefore we have to choose English.
So we have conscious use when we work with English, and be aware that not everything can be thought, not everything can be said in this language, that we have a plurality of languages that offer different opportunities for thinking and doing and feeling and writing, and that the most exciting thing would be to learn to combine this in a sensible and readable and understandable way.
And that it is published by Routledge, for instance, that gives us the possibility to let it spread. so that these voices are heard, can be heard all over the world.
So publishing in Routledge, I would say that this will give us, much more visibility, and of course, giving a voice to other performance cultures. And definitely, I don't find it as something very negative, and absolutely not, because we've been publishing, for example, in Morocco, more than 70, books in the center, the International Center for Performance Studies. Most of them are in Arabic, but we have serious difficulties in reaching out even, performance scholars in the Arab world. And why is that? Simply because we need a whole armada, to spread, this, all over the Arab world.
The important thing is not where it appears, but what appears in it. And there are always the people speaking from their own culture, and not we.
Given me tools to think about performance in new ways, and certainly just simply terms to talk about it in new ways, which isn't to say that they particularly or always should be applied to Western performance, or that I'm using them actively in the way I speak about Western performances that I write about, but it makes me understand performances in these regions at a much deeper level that I otherwise wouldn't have been able to.
This handbook is trying to communicate that there could be gaps in knowledge that we might not be even aware of, but they only are made visible when we interact with each other from different cultures and understandings that we might not have of our own performance culture or culture at large. It's only in the encounters between cultures that gaps are made visible and can be addressed.
The major concern of this project, as I see it myself, is really a kind of, let's say, going forward, at least to explore certain, epistemic differences between, let's say, East and West, and North and South, but not geographically, but also as, the global South as an epistemology as well.
And I understand our handbook project as an exercise in this interlingual, interepistemic research and writing.
Yeah, of course, you can't incorporate the whole diversity of the world, in one book, but definitely the book provides a framework and a format, that is quite inclusive, and of course it can be very much influential in the future, for other scholars and for other performance traditions to write about their own proper, I would say, theater concepts.
Well, this is, as I said, this is a beginning, and it had to do with what kind of people we had here and with whom we could cooperate. Except these 6 languages, there will also be one contribution on Maori, which is a very different language, by which we just wanted to show we would like to extend, but that's not possible here. So I would just advise people from other cultures to start such kind, first for their own language, to do such an idea. What theater concepts do they have? First to bring them together and then discuss what kind of an epistemic system do they form. I mean, our center cannot do that for the whole world. We had to rely on the people we had here and with whom we could cooperate. But I think it would be kind of a springboard maybe when people from cultures who are not included read it, that they say, oh, look, what's in our language? Let's go and make something for our own language. I think then this handbook would have done a very good job.
Thank you very much. Maybe we can have Astrid with us. Khalid. Astrid and Erika Fischer, if possible. We still have like 10 minutes exact to go to the next panel with Richard Scheckner. Hello again. So how are you, Erika?
Oh, I'm fine. I'm fine. It was funny to see now the whole thing, how it is cut and done with, but I think it's fine.
Maybe one last word about the project of Arabic theater concepts being translated into English. Yes?
Astrid.
Hello, Astrid. Can you hear us?
Hello, yes, I can hear you.
Very good. So it's very good to hear from you. By the way, you know, in the video, your voice is sort of absent, at least in this half an hour. But definitely, I know that you've been investing a great deal, you know, a lot of energy in the project. Would you say more, I mean, few words about the Arabic section of the book, particularly?
Well, thank you for your kind words. But actually, I have to give that compliment back because we, the editors, Professor Fischer-Lichte, Thorsten Joos, and I, we were just the initiators of the project. And we're giving the platform, the facility, the infrastructure as good as we could. And I think the center is one of the few places in the world that could launch this project. But really, the main participants of this project were our authors. It was you, dear Khalid. Without you, really, it would have not been possible. You've showed so much engagement, knowledge, expertise, work, consistency over the past years, and all the other authors involved, that without all of you, the project is not possible. And I don't say it just like that, because it's true. We are not expert on performance cultures in the Arabic language. We are not. We know nothing. We only knew a little bit what you and your colleagues told us. And so we rely on all of your expertise. And it was, I have to say, a very enriching project also personally for me, and I think for the other two as well, to learn so much and to be able to learn so much from all of you, and to be able to ask questions that might seem very, very basic and silly sometimes to you, because we don't know so much about it. And you were always, all of you, so open and friendly to answer those questions. And so this project has been an amazing journey. And I don't think if anything like it existed before. And I'm very, very excited that we could make it happen and have it with us. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And also thank you for the energy and the investment. Yes, maybe if Erika is still with us, if we think about the whole project, I mean, Swahili, Chinese, Indian, and also Arabic, etc. What are the future prospects for what are the next steps, so to speak?
Well, the next step our center cannot do, because we will finish by the end of July. So we can hope that until that point, the book will be ready and we can make a public presentation of it. But we do very much hope that other people who see this book and use it, that, as Astrid said already, that they feel that it would be a very good thing to do something for their own concepts as well. And I think really they must not do it for, I do not know how many languages, but if each of these languages would do such an encyclopedia for their own performance-related concepts, it would be fantastic, I think. It's fantastic we learned also a lot about our own concepts and how they relate to each other when we worked on that. Because usually we always use these words and terms and concepts and do not think much about how they relate among each others. And I think this would be a good opportunity in each culture to see what a very particular epistemic system is formed by these concepts that they have in their own language.
Thank you so much, Professor Erika Fischer-Lichte. And definitely, you know, while you were speaking, I was thinking also about the concept of performance and the way it traveled, you know, from English to German, French and Arabic and other languages. And definitely this mobility is creating a kind of, you know, instability, I would say, in the concept itself, the way it is framed, maybe because of the lack of translatability, or maybe because it's very difficult for a performance paradigm, say, you know, Moroccan or let's say Nigerian, etc., to accept, you know, a kind of concept that is somehow, you know, foreign. But, you know, when we translate it, we definitely inform it, or at least the translation is being informed and deformed sometimes by other, you know, aspects that are somehow located in the borderline, I mean, in this zone of friction most of the time. So, yeah, the concept of performance, as I said, when it traveled all over and came to Morocco, for example, and to the Arab world. So, yeah, we use it differently. We use forja in the Maghreb, and they use Ada in the Middle East. So, and between forja and Ada, there is a whole gap, definitely, that we can make, you know, I mean, we can talk about differences and you know, dissimilarities much more than you know, similarities. So once again, it has been a great pleasure, you know, to have you among us in this panel, speaking about the you know, the theater concepts and the way, the mobility and the way they travel across cultures. And of course, this is the project, the book project that you are editing, and of course for Routledge, it's one of, I would say, one of the exemplary projects that can be really, you know, be thought of as one of the possibilities for real interweaving between cultures. And of course, our deployment and use of English is not really that it's dominant or a hegemonic language, but much more we think of it as a lingua franca, a language that connects us, and we can, of course, speak our own languages within that English. So we speak Arabic into English as you speak German in English.
Yeah. So it is.
Thank you very much, Erika. Thank you.
Thank you.